morning, everybody. I'm really thrilled to be able to welcome all of you who are here in person at the Brookings Institution and all of you who are joining us online for this amazing event. I'm Camille Busette. I'm the Vice President of Governance Studies, which is the program here at Brookings that focuses on how do we retain and sustain a resilient, dynamic, and inclusive democracy. I also am the director of the Race, Prosperity, and Inclusion Initiative, and today we are absolutely thrilled to be hosting a conversation between John Boyd Jr., the president of the National Black Farmers Association, who is a historic American figure in his own right, and Dr. Rayshawn Ray, a senior fellow here at Brookings, and also a nationally recognized sociologist. In the current context, and particularly as we engage in the conversation today, we are reminded of the words of Dr. Martin Luther King that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. With that, I'm going to turn things over to my colleague, Dr. Ray, and I want you to please provide a really warm welcome to both Dr. Ray and John Boyd Jr.
All right, thank you all so much for joining us today. I'm super excited for this conversation. And of course, we thank Dr. Camille Busette, Vice President in Governance Studies, for that warm introduction, and also to President Rouse and the rest of our colleagues here at the Brookings Institution. I am honored to be sitting here with John Boyd Jr., founder and president of the National Black Farmers Association, owns Boyd Farm, which is a 1,500-acre farm in Virginia. His political appointments over the years have included being appointed by then Virginia Governor Tim Kaine to serve as co-chair of his policy committee on agriculture and forestry during the transition period. In 2000, Boyd was appointed by President Bill Clinton to serve on his administration's Tobacco Commission. And prior to that, he was appointed by then Virginia Governor Jim Gilmore to serve on the Virginia Tobacco and Community Revitalization Commission. Those are just a few of the things that he probably won't mention here today. So I definitely wanted to talk about that political context. And in that, again, we are honored to be here. Before we dive in, John, to talk about the current settlement and its status, I want you to talk about your family. You are a fourth-generation farmer. Talk to us about your family, how you got into farming, how your family got into farming, and then also the ways that farming intersects with wealth, enslavement, and politics in America.
Wow, what a loaded question for me to open
We can break it up in two.
Yes, thank you. First of all, it's an honor and a privilege to be here. And very early on in my career, I came to listen to many great speakers here, the Reverend Jesse Jackson, Vernon Jordan, well, others that I listened to here at the historic Brookings Institute. And one of my dreams was to speak and be a part of a platform here today. So one of my dreams are coming true today. So thank you very much for having me. I'm joined today by my wife, who's here, Kara. And she's brilliant in her own right. So my daddy said, John, you're married up. So I done pretty good here. Yeah. I'm a fourth-generation farmer from Boydton, Virginia, slave name. And I tied that into the second part of the question. And my forefathers were all farmers on both sides. My mother's parents, they had 9 children. They were sharecroppers, Lee and Ruth Robinson. And I was partly raised by them, and I learned the art and skill set of shucking and jiving because they ran a shot house, and they were tobacco sharecroppers. So I was partly raised by a sharecropper, and Granddaddy Lee died as a sharecropper. And everybody who came through the shot house didn't bring their girlfriends. They brought their girlfriends, they never brought their wives. So when you saw them out, that's not the person you brought to grandma's house. So I got to see who and how the skill set of shucking and jiving and telling lies on the weekend and all of that stuff. And my daddy's parents, and they were hardworking people. And I don't want to underscore the significance of my grandparents. I learned arithmetic, man, from Grandma Ruth. $1 shot, how many pints in a gallon, all of this stuff. I learned as a little boy from Grandma Ruth. I was too young to hang out with the older cousins, so I was the oldest of the little kids, and I saw everything that went around the house. So God was preparing me for the journey that I had in front of me. And my dad's people, my daddy was the greatest man I knew in the flesh, and he died in 2022. He taught me everything, one, how to be a man, and two, how to farm. He taught me how to tie a Windsor knot on my leg, and he said, you wear a white shirt now, you can go out and get a job any way you want. And he taught me how to plow a mule. He said, now, if you can plow this mule, John, there's no job in the United States that you can't do. And farming, people, is the hardest occupation known to man. It's sun up to sundown, 24/7, and you have to have, I told my wife when I asked her to marry her, I said, well, I got a girlfriend. She said, well, you got a girlfriend? I said, yeah. My girlfriend is Mother Nature. And I had to know how to dance and mingle with Mother Nature, because when the time comes and the ground is right, I have to go to work. So I learned how to farm from my dad and my grandfather, Thomas Board, who taught me basic tools and arts and skill set about farming, that the land is everything, John. Everything good and great comes from the land. Clean drinking water, food to put on your table, timber to build houses, and the best family skill set comes from the farm. And you have your name in the county community, in that particular community, by your farm. So they would say that's the Harris farm, or that's the Boyd farm, or that's the Jones farm. And we came from the Boyd plantation. And my grandfather was able to purchase 117 acres from William and Nat'l Boyd after the Civil War. And he passed along that generational wealth to his children. And we still have some of those original acres today. There's a black cemetery on the Boyd plantation, and there's a white cemetery on the Boyd plantation. Whites didn't get buried with blacks, and vice versa. And that's the way it was. And when I was coming up as a kid, I knew Miss Ethel. I didn't know Mr. Williams. She was the last of that Boyd plantation type era. And I knew that we had to help Miss Ethel. I didn't know why, but we had to go and help her on the farm. And I never liked to go over there, but I went anyway. But she was always very nice to me. And I didn't understand the relationship as a kid of us coming out of the slave era really into the free times of after the Civil War and all of these things. So I'm gonna stop right there, but I learned everything I knew about farming from my daddy, and I want to give him some credit today for that.
Oh, yeah, most definitely. I mean, that's amazing hearing that family story. And, of course, we talked about that a little bit. You talked about the context about enslavement on that land and how you all acquired it. Can you talk about this in a broader context as it relates to wealth and politics in America, and the way that as we think about land and what it means and how it builds equity over time, that's been something that has been mostly taken away from black farmers and individuals who have owned land like your family.
Yes.
But conversely, your family has been able to build more wealth in terms of the acreage of the land. Can you speak to that juxtaposition?
I can, and thank you very much for that question. I have two messages for that. One is, if you're a black person in this country and you're watching today, go out and buy 5 acres of land. Don't buy that raggedy car and pickup truck. Go out and buy something that God doesn't make any more of, which is land. You can't grow any more land. You can't make any more land. It is what it is. And for those blacks, especially in the southern states, the Alabama and Mississippi and Arkansas and Louisiana, I got a message for you today. Don't sell the land. Don't sell the land. Don't sell the land. Don't sell the land. If you sell the land, it's not coming back. So we had two problems about land ownership. One was the government using the county committee and a legalized way to get land from blacks. At the turn of the century, we owned 20 million acres of land. We're down to 3.5 million acres of land. There were 1 million black families in this country that owned land at the turn of the century. We're down to 50,000 black farmers that make a living farming here in the United States. The government was at the core of that, taking the land through the county committee, and they had all types of programs that trick blacks into signing documents, and next thing you know, you're on the auction block. And then you had the Great Migration. We called it Up South, where many blacks thought we were leaving what we thought was an awful thing to moving towards something that we thought was a better thing. The Great Migration turned into, if you lived in Alabama and Mississippi and Arkansas and Louisiana, you drove straight ahead to Michigan and Chicago looking for a better way of life. If you lived in the Carolinas and Georgia and places like that, you drove straight ahead to Washington, D.C., where they want to take away now, you know, and straight ahead to New York City, where my parents did, and we moved back. So we left the land thinking we were doing something great. Instead of one family member staying on the land and the other children leaving and then giving back to the farm to help keep it in the family, many of us after Daddy died said, you know what? I ain't never going back to Boydton, Virginia. I'm going to sell the land. If you sell the land, it's not coming back. So the government isn't responsible for that piece of it. We are. But the government is sure guilty of putting land in federal inventory. They had 1.5 million acres of land when I started suing the government in the late 80s and early 90s that came from black people. The minute we started suing the government and started making progress in the federal court, USDA went on a national campaign to sell all of those acres out of federal inventory. And I'm getting ahead of myself, so I'm gonna stop there.
No, you rolling. This is exactly it. I mean, on that point, let's talk about the founding of the organization. Let's talk about the founding of the National Black Farmers Association, which you founded in 1995. And you just gave us some statistics, and I just want to repeat a couple of them to make sure people really understand. A century ago, it was roughly 1 million black farmers, and today make up only about 1%, 50,000. And then when we talk about land ownership, you mentioned how that plummeted. Black people now owning only about 2% of land in the U.S. How did these trends inform the founding of the organization and its work? And in doing so, walk us through some of these initial court cases in the 1990s, because I think a lot of people, and we're going to get to that in a second, of course, some of these big numbers that people have seen, but walk us through 3 decades ago in terms of what you were thinking, what you were doing, and how these trends were informing the organization.
Well, a couple of things. One, I bought my first farm when I was 18. You see, people, I never wanted to do this, what you see me doing today, but God gave me the gift of this. I actually had a speech impediment as a kid. And when I was thrust out here into the limelight, I said, man, I can't do this. And God gave me this gift. So this thing here has become my best friend. But when we started the movement, we actually reorganized in 1995. We were around since the 80s. And some of my mentors, I was 18 years of age. My mentors were Linwood Brown, Sylvester Warren, very older black farmers in the area that kept me clean in the beginning of the movement. So this whole movement, I always visualize it in the triangular effect. You know, the executive branch, legislative branch, and the judicial branch. And I tied them all together in that triangle effect. So I was suing the government, which was completely taboo in the 80s. And I started picketing the United States Department of Agriculture using my mule, man. I name my mules, always give them names. Media loves names. They love names, man. I caught on quick. And I named mine 40 Acres and Justice. 40 acres and struggle. I would change it up, depending on whether the rain was shining or the sun was out, man. But I named them 40 Acres and a Mule because my daddy said, "You need a mule out there, boy." I said, "A mule?" He said, "Yes, every black person over the age of 50 will understand the significance of a mule to a black farm family in the South," because he said, if you had a horse and you were a black family in the South, man, you were upscale. But every black family had a mule, and that mule was a part of the family. When I was a kid, my grandfather used to make me get up, brush the mule, and tie him to the tree and dress him up and brush him and feed him. And I said, "Granddad, you ain't going nowhere today." I said, "Why do I need to dress this mule up?" He said, "That mule is a part of my family." He said, "That mule is my work. That mule is my transportation. And if I have to go somewhere, I want him to be ready." So that's the significance of the mule and the actual movement that I used. And I rode my mule and wagon 17 days from my farm in Baskerville, Virginia, all the way to Washington, D.C., and I slept in the wagon. I had a sleeping bag. And I met some nice people. And I met some people like you see in the office today. They didn't like me. They didn't like the fact that I was out here pressing for justice for black farmers. But we came up with the name. And every 10 years, they change our name. When I first started out in the movement in the 80s, they wouldn't even print the word black farmer. They said you had to say minority farmer in order to get any support. Then they changed our name to socially disadvantaged farmer. Now they call us farmers of color. Now Trump done named us DEI. All they do is change our name, but when we were upstairs in my house, it was in the month of February, and it got dark very early, and we were debating on the name of the organization. I said, "Well, why not Black Farmers?" I said, the man was spitting on me because I was black and calling me the N-word because I was black and tearing my application up because I was black. And the other guy said, "Well, we're not going to be able to raise any money like that, John Boy." That was my nickname in the movement growing up, John Boy with no D on the end. And they turned my lights out a few minutes before 5 o'clock. And Mr. Warren said, "Well, John Boy, there it is. Don't get no blacker than what it is in here. We're going to call ourselves the National Black Farmers Association." And that's how we got our name. And here we are, 40 some odd years later. That movement is always skipped in the civil rights story. So you hear about Jim Crow, and then we go right into the 60s, and then we go into the Black Lives Matter. But in between there, Fred can tell you, that there was the Black Farmers Movement that was picketing around the country, that was making headlines. And when I first started out, I was a FFA student with Future Farmers of America. And there was a visit coming to the White House. I had never been to Washington. I was a young kid. And they said, "Well, board, you want to go?" I said, "Well, yes, I don't have any money." They said, "Well, they're going to give you a stipend." This young guy said, "Well, what's a stipend?" They said, "They're going to give you a few dollars, man, and pay your way." Long story short, we visit the White House, and I'm in here with all these white kids. Close your ears. I ain't racist. I love white people, too. I'm just telling the story. And I'm the only black kid in there with an 8-inch afro. And this black staffer comes out to greet me. He had an afro. And he said, "You and you and you and you and you come with me." And we went with him. And here's Jimmy Carter, in the Oval Office, a little decent little white guy that with a plaid jacket on. And he started talking to me and made me feel like I was the only person in the room. And I told him that one of my grandfathers was a sharecropper. And he knew all about the lifestyle. And that was my first meeting with the president. And I've been meeting with every president, Republican and Democrat, in the White House ever since. So don't tell me that this still ain't a great country. It may be going in the wrong direction today, but you know the pendulum always swings back. And it swings back, and sometimes when it hits, it gets louder. It's swinging that direction today, but when it goes back, it's going to ring loud. That wasn't even part of the talk here today, but that pendulum is going to swing today. And we began to pick at the government, and I went out to the White House to protest about the lack of loans, 387 days to process a black farm loan request, less than 30 days to process a white farm loan request. And I'm out in front of the White House with my mule. And I bent down, I had some lace-up wingtip boots on to tie my boot, and I tied my mule to the gate. And you know, mules ain't like us, they don't listen. And he started janging and pulling on the gate. And they said, man, some black guy out here trying to break into the White House with a mule. And that's how the story broke into the media, and it became above the fold story. And I got a meeting with President Bill Clinton on December, I believe it was 17th, 1997. And that meeting led to the settlement of our class action case that was pending in federal court. I filed that lawsuit in every state in the South, from Texas to Louisiana to Georgia. And every time it failed, I would make changes to the complaint based on what the judges told me. And it was a guy from the Justice Department. His name was Michael Sitkoff. He was kicking my butt in every federal courthouse. And by the time we got to Washington, I told the core group of guys with me, I said, man, if we can't get something done, we're going to have to go to the administrative process at USDA, and that could take years to settle all these cases. I didn't want to do that. And we walked into the courtroom that day in that hearing, and the judge's name was Paul Friedman. And I was prepared to hear what I heard in Richmond, Virginia a few months ago, that Boyd and his attorneys failed to tie discrimination to the law. And he had never seen so much overwhelming discrimination in all his time at the bench. That's what the last judge said. And we walked into the courtroom. I had a pair of tan pants on and a plaid shirt. And I drove a 1970 Chevrolet 3 on the collar to the courtroom. I can tell you what I was driving and what I was wearing. And Judge Friedman told Michael Sitkoff that he wanted to hear some more about the discrimination that Boyd and others described in his complaint. And Michael Sitkoff said, Your Honor, you can't hear this case. It failed in every state, and here's why it shouldn't move, and so on and so forth. And he said, we're not prepared to move forward. And Judge Friedman said, never come in my courtroom and not be prepared to move forward in this court. And we're going to hear this case today. And the rest is history. Bill Clinton asked the Department of Justice to enter into a settlement, and we did so in 1999, at that time becoming the largest settlement in history for black people. $1 billion was paid to 20,000 black farmers, $50,000 in 12.5 for taxes. I'm the most unrecognized civil rights activist in history, undeniably. $8 billion that I can tie my activity to, and nobody knows my name. There's some brother out there with a black hat, man.
Oh, people know your name. People definitely know your name.
Some brother with a mule or something, but I'm going to stop there.
No, people definitely know your name. And you just touched on a big number. People hear 8 billion. They hear 5 billion, 2.2 billion, 1.15 billion across different administrations. And you talked about meeting with all the presidents since Carter, right? Of course, he's a Southerner like us from Georgia. I'm from Tennessee. Not even going to go into my mule story. My granddaddy's mule named Jack. Had to take care of the mules. As you think about these historical settlements, give everybody an update on the status of them. Because again, people hear this money, you just talked about payouts, and it was important for people to recognize how many farmers you were talking about and how much money it was.
Yes.
And even though the total sum sounds like a lot, when you're talking about going to individual farmers and individual farms, it's not a lot. So, and accordingly, give us an update on what's happening in the courts.
Yes.
And the resistance that you're facing now,
Yes.
and the ways that you're having to use resources and time, even some of the money from the settlements, I would suppose, going to the organization to fight these court cases. Talk about the current status and how the money is tied up currently.
Yes, thank you very much for that. And I'm going to leave out some of the real intimate details of this, but in 99, we settled the first part of it. 83,000 black farmers came after the filing deadline. That took me an additional 10 years to get that case heard by an act of Congress. The bill failed 11 times before it finally passed in the Senate for $1.25 billion that was signed into law by former President Barack Obama, who was the lead sponsor on the bill before he became president. And the co-sponsor was Senator Biden. Little did I know that both of these men will go on to be president of the United States. And when President Obama said, hey, board, I'm going to be the lead sponsor, he said, I may make a run for president, man. I may need you. This is how we're talking. He said, I may need you to help me. And I'm a veteran by then. And you know how, man, yeah, you know, whatever you need me to do. So I get the call to come to Columbia, South Carolina. He had just introduced the bill. And they said, Strap Miner said, well, board, O wants you to come to South Carolina to talk about the effects of the bill and how it would help people in the South. And I told him, absolutely. I said, Columbia's a couple-hour drive from my farm. I said, I could be there. I walk into a room maybe about the size of this, and there were more cameras than it was people. And Barack Obama says, Senator Obama at that time says, and we got John Boyd here, president. This is when they say he won't black enough. We got John Boyd here, president of the National Black Farmers Association, and he's endorsing me to be president of the United States. Come on up here, John. And I came up and I talked about the bill, and I'm a veteran by now. I talked about the bill and the effects it would have if we can get it moving in the black community. And a reporter stood up and said, well, John, I didn't hear whether you were supporting Senator Obama. I said, oh, yeah, I'm endorsing him. That same brother that I told you about that took me in to meet Jimmy Carter, his name is Ben Johnson. It's the same person who took me in to meet Bill Clinton. This is a small circuit in Washington, D.C., and he was the same brother who was now heading up Hillary Clinton's African-American approach and outreach in her campaign. And he's the only black man I ever let cuss me because he's now my mentor. And he said, you've been out 8 years with George Bush, and you're going to be out 8 more years with Hillary Clinton for endorsing this guy. And my brother says, John, what's the worst thing that could happen? Senator Clinton wasn't on your bill. This guy's the lead sponsor. He said, just go out there with him and see what happens. And he turned the corner. And I turned the corner with him. And was later interviewed to be Agriculture Secretary. I didn't get the job, but I can tell you, if I had it, it'd have been a much different road out from here to what you see today. And I'm telling you these stories because in a fast manner. That's the second part of that. And December 8, 2010, we signed the Claims Remedy Act that allowed an additional 20,000 black farmers to have their cases heard that received money to have their cases heard based on merit. Former Senator Ted Kennedy was a huge sponsor of that during that time period. He became ill and had to find another senator to be the lead sponsor. And Chuck Grassley, I know many people don't like his politics, but I like that old guy. Let me tell you why. Because when he told me yes, it was yes. And when he told me he was going to vote yes, he always voted yes. And he didn't change his mind, and you couldn't make him change his mind. So he remained my leading senator on the Republican side. And those advocates that are watching this, no matter what party you align yourself with, you got to have yourself a few go-to friends on each side. If not, you'll be out here standing out here with a picket sign for 50 years. That's my advice to you today. Go out and make yourself some friends. And then I'm going to bring you up to where we are. And then today, I worked on both of those complaints. We never got debt relief. I was after my land the whole time. As a matter of fact, I started the movement because I was facing foreclosure. They foreclosed on one of my farms, and I was able to save the second farm from President Clinton and Dan Glickman issuing a farm moratorium that saved my farm on the auction blocks, and I still have it today. So there is a difference in politics, whether people try to tell you this or not. And we never got debt relief. So I started petitioning Congress to get debt relief. It was in the Farm Bill in 2016. It was taken out during conference. And you guys know about midnight what happened. Some strange things happened at midnight. They took the language out. I woke up. All of a sudden, debt relief on in there. I'm going forward to 2021. We finally get debt relief in there, $5 billion for black and other farmers of color. And I was the happiest man alive. Stephen Miller, the guy who was following me around on the Hill, coming to all of my congressional briefings, taking notes, came up with a crafty message about anti-discrimination and white farmers getting left out, and started suing us in federal court to block the $5 billion to black and other farmers of color. He was successful in Florida and Texas, and I had to raise money in each one of those states that he filed a complaint in. I had to raise money and hire law firms in each one of those states to defend our position and get our language into the courts. After we became successful maybe once or twice in that manner, the Biden administration repealed it, repealed the whole $5 billion and broke it down in the different languages that they thought would be helpful. Long story short, we didn't get the 120%. I fought it as a broken promise. I related it to 40 acres and a mule because this is the mechanism that contains land ownership for black and other farmers in this country. We didn't get it, and we went to court last week here in Washington and made an appeal before 3-panel appeals judges and asked them to move the case forward because we see it as a broken contract. Black farmers signed it. We made changes based on USDA's communication with us. 100% to pay the loan off, 20% for the taxes, 120%. We did not get it. I want to be clear. We did get $2.2 billion that I worked on for a very, very long time. And the payments, I do not want to underscore the significance of that, went to 45,000 or 43,000 farmers around the United States. The NBFA held 60 meetings around the country, online Zoom calls, and it took, and my wife is here, I want to give her credit for this, that she done a marvelous job of helping us organize our staff to go out and meet with these farmers and take these calls day after day. It took 3 hours to do each and every one of these 40-page applications. We done it, turned them in. I didn't like the process. That's the process that we had. 43,000 got checks. The others didn't. And here we are today. We didn't get debt relief. But I want to tell you, I ain't giving up. I ain't giving in. I ain't giving out. I don't care what the president says. Guess what, people? There's someone up way above him. And he's watching and he's looking down. And he don't like what he see today. So you're stomping on the little people today. But eventually the little people will come together, and there's more poor people than it is rich people in this country. And history has shown us that the little people always rise. It may take a little bit, but they're going to rise up above this nonsense that you see going on here today. And I'm going to take a break because I'm getting emotional right now, but I'll take the next part of that question.
Like it. Everybody's listening. Everybody's listening, especially me. I got a few more questions, then we're going to open it up to the audience. You mentioned different political parties, presidents, individuals who've been involved. You hold everyone to task, and accordingly, it's important that you noted that there is a difference in the support. And the current administration has dismantled USAID, USAID, depending on how people want to say it, and implemented tariffs on different countries. And you've talked about the impact that has on prices, the impact that has on farmers, from soybeans to fertilizer to everything and the like. Can you talk about how substantial these changes are?
Yes.
Not only how they affect farmers, but also how they affect Americans more broadly.
Yes. We're heading for the worst economic times in history for America's farmers right now today. The president immediately came in, and I believe in giving the person the office of the highest land respect, Republican or Democrat. The president of the United States came in and said 10% tariff on China, 25% on Mexico and Canada. All of those things are a direct impact on our nation's farmers. Large-scale farmers going to hurt way more than black farmers in this country. I can promise you that. It creates uncertainty in the agriculture sector. The last time President Trump was in office, he came in and imposed tariffs on China. The prices, I was making money, man, when he came in, $16.80 a bushel. I was selling soybeans for. He came in, imposed the tariffs, didn't have any other markets in a line for America's farmers, and the price fell out the bottom. It went down to from $16.80 a bushel down to $6. So of those of you, you would have to do your same job for 50% less pay. Total, it's difficult to do. Those tariffs are going to hurt America's farmers. It's hurting our reputation around the world. USAID, they came in and they said, oh man, we found some fraud. We found some funding and stuff that was spent wrong. Well, good. I'm glad for you. Take that money and invest it back into America's farmers. Take that money and invest it back into the American people. But lead the food program that feeds 58 million people, needy people around the world, in place. They don't want to do that. So instead, they'd rather have stockpiles of corn and soybeans and wheat at these buying stations where USAID has already purchased the grain. They're going to sit there and rot. It's going to rot. Why not give it to needy families here in America, or needy groups that can? The logic of what they're saying is good isn't good, people. I'm telling you it's not. I am a farmer. The issue with chickens right now, they're saying, Biden killed 100 million. Man, Biden ain't killed no 100 million nothing. This is crazy. Listen, bird flu. You have the issue with bird flu, right? We have black farmers right now that can't get loans to upgrade their contracts so that they can put a new flock of chickens in their house. I've raised poultry for 14 years. You have to have your house up to standard to raise these chickens. You have to have the technology and the lines to come in to pick the eggs up. All of these things have to be in place. But when you can't get a loan, this administration came in and they said, what? We're going to freeze the loans and grants. First thing they did was cut off money to the NBFA. People out there, we need money. We need it now. Give to this organization. I'm going to make that plea. They came right in and cut off all grants to anybody that looked like us, black people, and went through those contracts and cooperative agreements at USDA, cut all that off. All this stuff ties to USAID because the people that they were helping looked like me. Tanzania and South Africa. In fact, this president wants to bring South African farmers to the United States and give them a homestead from grazing lands from Native Americans and inventory land from USDA and provide white farmers here from South Africa, bring them here, but you won't help black farmers in the United States. And you're trying to tell me something isn't wrong with that. You won't help Hispanic farmers. You won't help Native American farmers. But you're going to bring farmers from South Africa into the United States and give them a homestead. Huh? Black people ain't never got a homestead in this country. We never got the land. We had to buy it. We had to buy it after segregation and Jim Crow and all of this stuff. So this president is wrong. He's wrong for this time in history. He's wrong for what he's doing to our country. He's dismantling civil rights. He's a totally uproar. Came in and announced all of these executive orders while we were asleep at the wheel. Shame on him for that. And when we're in charge, the other side, here's my message here. They said, hey, board, we ain't gonna focus on rural America, and our platform won't be farmers. Two of the biggest mistakes you can make. Go after rural America, go after white farmers, and make a plea for them and say why they should vote for our candidate, because their vote counts too. Big mistake. We didn't make a statement on immigration. Big mistake. These are things that Republicans do better than Democrats. We got to do a better job at bringing this country back together, bringing it up to middle, and the way to do that is for the average little people to wake up and stand up and say, I ain't gonna lay down and take this. That we're gonna fight, we're gonna march, we're gonna make our voices heard. If you can vote, you can make your voice heard, people. Don't sit back and watch this on the news. If you got the opportunity to write some nonsense on Facebook, write about how we can make this country better. Use your voice and stand up and use it in a positive way. That wasn't part of my talk, but I thought I'd tell you.
Look, we gonna take it. We gonna take it. I mean, and I want to make 3 points. Let's go ahead and open it up to the audience. So feel free to raise your hand, and we'll get to you. Three points you made. You're talking about loans.
Yes.
It's extremely important for people to recognize, from black farmers to black homeowners. People aren't trying to get a handout. People are simply trying to get loans. And not only are black people less likely to get loans, even when they get them, they get higher interest rates. So now they're having to pay more money back. You talked about the Homestead Act, trying to bring, and want to be clear again, what you said, white farmers from South Africa. Just think about that context, what people learned about Nelson Mandela.
They could read that press release on the White House.
Oh, yeah.
It's on whitehouse.gov. Don't take my word for it. Go out and read it for yourself.
Yeah, and Musk is from South Africa, and we know a lot of the context there. And in the U.S., the Homestead Act is important because that was supposed to be some of the legislation that allowed formerly enslaved people to get land. But instead, that was taken away. We did not have that opportunity. And instead, it allowed for mostly white people to end up getting land heading west, the railroads, all of the development that happened in the western part of the United States. We're talking about millions of acres of land simultaneously happening while black farmers were losing land. So it's important to recognize that juxtaposition. And the final thing you mentioned is about how things are called, what things are called, how we've been called different names as black folks.
Yes.
What's important there is that the rapper might change. It might still look fancy. It's a fancy rapper, but it's still the same poison inside that rapper. Yes. And that's part of what you're highlighting over time. Let's get some questions. Raise your hand if you got a question. Yes, sir. We'll go there, and then we'll go to you second.
Good morning. Thank you for being here. I'm Ibrahim Mukman, and I'm here in Washington, D.C. First of all, I'd like to respectfully disagree with the moderator. He was saying in your introductory remarks, everybody knows who John Boyd is. I didn't know who he was. I'm here today because I wanted to learn. And I'm hoping that you have a book or a documentary or something on yourself and the black farmers so that people like me who are activists, I'm embarrassed that I don't know who you are in your name. But I have a question. I recently got arrested as a teenager in the civil rights movement in Columbus, Georgia.
Yes.
Trying to go to an all-white library. But we have all of these cities. My question is, how can we, in addition to the strategy of suing and doing all that stuff you're doing with the legislative stuff, I told the kids the opposite of boycott is support. And I think, to me, what's conspicuously missing now is that there's a disconnect between those people who are activists and how can we support you. is there a way that black farmers can bring stuff to cities like Washington, D.C. and sell it? I know that there are many places in the city that have people who come in with farm stuff a couple of times a year and stuff. And that way, in addition to seeking the legal and stuff from the court, we can also take our money and buy things because you can help earn your way out of this.
Man, you said another speech, man. You got to invite me back here so I can just address your question. But I'm glad that you know about my work, and I'm hopeful that you would spread the work to others that you're in connection with. When people think of farming, and especially for black farmers, they think of us as just truck farmers. Agriculture is made up primarily two types of farming. One that my wife is pretty good at talking about is regenerative agriculture. That's what they call it now. That's really black farming. They call it regenerative agriculture now. We have small acres and rotating all that stuff. That's a small type of operation. And then there's 3 commodity farming that I'm doing, which is corn, wheat, and soybeans. You won't find us on the side of the road. You'll find us in mass production in fields. It's that type of agriculture. I'm fighting to save both. One, I want to see more 3 commodity farmers stay and make it to the next generation of farmers. We got 2 things that has to happen there. We need more young people to stand up and say, I want to do the work, not just the idea of and thought of it. There's an art set and work ethic that goes with being a farmer. You can't quit, you can't give up, you can't give in. You have to stay with it. I'm recruiting those type of people, and the small scale farmer that you would see beside the road that sell fresh fruits and vegetables. We want to do a better job at connecting with people like you that can support us. So the next year we're going to be doing more of that because the government said they don't want black farmers. And guess what? When you tell me you don't want me, I don't want you either. And we're going to make those changes.
Oh, we need the people online need to hear you.
Okay, yeah. I don't need one. I don't like to use mics forever. But I'd like to say thank you for your time today and the great wisdom you gave us on your experience and your history within the industry. I didn't know much about you before entering today's space. I'm only 24 years old, went to Morehouse, so I'm trying to, help the future advance and things like this. So my question to you is, how, as a community, how can we take that next step in continuing to, get these policies changed to continue to, pour more into places like D.C., places that has prominent black communities but don't have people that's around to show you these ways and, how to buy land and stuff like that. So,
1, become a member of the National Black Farmers Association. That's the first thing you can do. And the second is we can help you identify a black farmer in your area that you can form a relationship with, that farmer can mentor you. We have regional conferences. We have a national conference every year. This year we had a record number, probably about 4,000 people in Columbus, Georgia. We had 4,000 people in Columbus, Georgia, in your state, man. And you still ain't heard of me, man. You got to tighten up back here.
That's what I'm saying.
That's what I'm saying. I'm just joking with you. But I'm saying that because we got to have you, man. And your face, your beautiful face, you're the next generation that it's not about me anymore. I'm the average age of a black farmer now. So we need people like you to step up, get involved, and I got to have you. So we get connected today. Our website is www.blackfarmerswithas.org. It's our website. Our phone number is 804-691-8528. Join today. And if you're not a farmer and you just want to support, make a donation. We need help. Yes.
Yeah. And there are some first-time home buyers programs, too, in most places.
Yes.
So if people don't currently own, that's also one of the first places you should look into. It'll take you through a course that can be extremely beneficial for learning the ins and outs of the financial side of real estate. Yes.
Yes. Good afternoon. Thank you, Dr. Boyd and Mrs. Boyd, for having this event. 2-part question. To your point of white South Africans coming to the U.S., how would you suggest that we fight basically a continuation of colonialism? And then the second part question is, how do we get the world to see Black farmers as titans, forerunners, using updated technology? To your point, I'm not sure that they see us in that light.
A couple of things. One is, when we have all this social media where we out here sharing this stuff. And I did a post here last week. I don't know if it was on TikTok. I ain't never been on TikTok in my life, but they said, man, if you want to reach this younger generation.
You on TikTok though, John.
Yeah,
You ain't been on TikTok, but you on TikTok.
yeah, I'm on TikTok. So, and my wife says, well, they only listened to 17 seconds and they're off to something else. That's the problem. And a lot of the stuff that we need to be reading, we won't take the time to read it. And my message to the young generation is turn off the nonsense and get educated and get involved. That's the message. And because guess what? The other side is every morning you turn on the news, guess what they're doing? They're announcing some new executive order. They got something now, they're going to take over all D.C. and put you in the box, and it's going to come underneath the White House now and underneath the federal government. That ain't clean enough. It got some graffiti. Guess what? Black people built the house he live in. Oh, you don't want to start me on that today. But we got to start somewhere, and we have to work together, and we have to have the mindset to do it, to stick together. Listen to me when I say this. All we know how to do is branch off. A previous secretary said, well, to get rid of John Boyd is, all we got to do is fund a few splinter groups, and they'll turn on each other. I'm telling you today, that's not the way to do it. Stick together. You can go out and start your splinter group, but support the brother up top that's out fighting the way and paving the way for you.
Yeah. So let's see how many hands we have. Okay, we're gonna try and do some rapid fire. Let's get you. Yes. And then we'll go to the back. Then we're gonna come back up here because your hand was up earlier too. Let's just see if we can get a few of these questions and then get you to respond to a few of them. Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. I will be very quick. You mentioned in your conversation regarding the SNAP program that is being cut back. So do you see a way where there are various programs, there are various brands that sell directly to the consumer. So do you see a way where you can connect directly with the consumer? Because we know across the country, there are issues relating to food desert, especially in Black communities. So as a farmer, is that something that you're looking into to address these issues?
Yes, we are.
Let's get this second question too.
Let's get the second
Then
one.
we'll get you to respond. Then we'll come over here. Yes.
Good morning. I'd like to just bring up issues that Black farmers, being a farmer myself, have problems with, and how can there be more education on and literature on assisting farmers that apply for various loans and cannot get information to assist them. Give you a recent example, applying for a loan as a reed farming, introducing into the farm. I've been a farmer all my life, but going back into it full force now. And when you read the language on applications, as I stated to the gentleman, they make it where you have to almost go do a term paper and research how to apply for a loan. And I think it's a disadvantage to new farmers. As a 24-year-old, don't know nothing about NASH, don't know about acres per this or per that, won't go into all the details, but I think the way that they're putting these applications is making it harder for disadvantaged people, Black, brown, or indifferent, to be able to even apply for the loans.
Yeah, so we got SNAP and we got information about applying for loans.
Yes. A couple of things, and I'll shoot myself if I didn't address something out here. There are others that are spreading bad information about the Black farmers and a process with the class actions, all of these things are open. None of those processes that I went through, all three of them, are closed and settled, and there's no money left. And if people are out there, we have people out there scamming people, charging them $100 for an application in the Deep South, where it's hard for us to get out there. And I've been out here saying, don't give anybody any money. Never pay anybody to be a part of a class action. You just don't do it. But we have elderly people who are not online, don't have the ability to put a John board and see what comes up. And these people come into the churches, they come into the areas where the information isn't there, and they're charging people saying that they can be a part of this. There's no money left, and none of those pots of money, they've all been dispersed. So for people that are watching this, if somebody's holding a meeting saying, pay me $100 or $200 for an application, don't do it. We do have a complaint with Ben Crump on a chemical case, has nothing to do with this one. And debt relief, you had to already been part of that process. Don't pay any monies to be a part of any of that stuff. So I want to be very, very clear on that. So I had to take a minute to address that. And if I missed that, my wife would scream at me all the way home.
No problem. Go ahead.
Christian Guichard.
SNAP.
SNAP. Well, food stamps. You know, they put agriculture and farmers into the same bill. I think that hurts us. They really should separate food stamps from actual legislation in Congress. The farm bill is a massive bill. Matter of fact, we don't even have a passed farm bill. We're acting on a continuing resolution. And this president, it won't be surprising to me that he's going to want to begin to mess with that too. There's another word for it, but I'm a religious man. I can't use that word. But he's going to want to mess with food stamps too. There's things that we can do to be prepared as farmers, to have healthy foods. You can start growing food in your backyard. You don't have to, be a full-time farmer. You can, if you have 2 acres of land and out in the country somewhere, out in the suburbs, you can put a food plot right in your backyard and plant you some tomatoes and onions and cucumbers. And guess what? There's no chemicals on it. The food is healthy for you and your family, and it tastes different, and you'll feel different, and you'll look better too, I promise you. Yes. No land size requirement, and then you have to get a farm serial number. That's another speech. Y'all need to bring me back to the Brookings Institute so I can.
We're gonna bring you back. Go ahead, sir.
More of these details.
I really appreciate the talk. I appreciate your points. And then
you gotta speak up. I've been attracted 40 years. I'm half deaf.
Sorry.
There you go. That's my man.
Christian Guichard. I appreciate both of your points. I was reading online before this just about the constitutionality of targeting specific policies, specific groups. Obviously, look, we speak about the backlash, the Trump backlash, Reconstruction era, Black Lives Matter, how oppression just recycles itself and comes back, and we solidified advantages in making National Black Farmers Association for Black farmers specifically. I think something I've seen is like the issue of when we get benefits from national policy, receiving it at the same time as say poor white people or other groups. That's sort of an issue in American culture. Is the timing and reception of benefits and aid. I was wondering, in areas or times when we've gotten the advantage, obviously you just want a settlement of $2.2 billion, where we get the restitution from wrong things being done to us in American history. How do we solidify those advantages? Do we solidify them by making cross-cutting cleavages, unions with other groups? And trying to move forward alongside people in the same socioeconomic status, or is it proper, or does it work still to focus on Black issues from the perspective of a Black farmer? I don't know. You spoke a little bit sometimes in the talk about needing to create connections with poor white farmers, poor Latino farmers in California. The focus is different on issues. It's more of a Latinx and Korean and Chinese and Japanese issue tied to labor unions. But I just wanted your opinion on that.
There's two ways to make changes. in the holistic stand, and I've been doing it on both ends, but I need people like you to step up now. It took too long to do the bills that passed for us. The first bill, statute of limitations, that allowed all of the cases to be heard based on merit. And guess what, people? I ain't just fight for black farmers. Native American farmers, Keep Siegel case, the Cobell settlement, the women's case, and the Hispanic case. Those are all cases that I worked on over those past years. And it took too long to get those bills through Congress. We have to learn how to get senators in key positions to sponsor us 1 or 2 line pieces of legislation and stick it into some of these spending bills the way the white farmers are doing that. And close your ears, I hate to say it, but that's what they're doing. We have to do a better job at that, at getting us some friends on the Hill that believe in what we're doing and put some language in there that'll help us. And when these spending bills come out, your line item is in there and you can start doing the work. Every time we figure out the process, they change the rules. And that's what this president is doing now. They know board figured it out. He's won $10 billion. This time, time to change the rules. You can change the rules, but you can't change a person's determination. I'm just as determined as ever. And I'm gonna figure out some new rules to beat them too.
I heard that. Look, unfortunately, we are out of time. If you're like me, you can listen to John Boyd Jr. all day, every day. And if people didn't know his name before, you definitely know his name now. 2 things as I close. First, I just want to give it up to the Brookings staff who continues to just do an amazing job putting on events like this. Thank you all. Thank you all for all that you all do. And again, give it up for John Boyd Jr. Thank you for being here. We appreciate your time, and you all have a good rest of the day.
Thank you.